This is the Chapter 3 Stigma Podcast. This podcast was created to be there for any individual who feels like they are at a low point in life and are confused, seemingly alone, and helpless in their situation. I am a recovering alcoholic, and I felt this way too, until I sat across the table from another addict who shared his story and made me realize that I was not alone in my struggles. My life was saved by this realization, and I hope to help anyone struggling by sharing my story to show you that you are not alone and that life can contain unbelievable riches and meaning. Welcome. I am glad you are here. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Chapter 3 Stigma Podcast. So before getting in, I do have something kind of embarrassing and a little ironic to admit at the start of this show, and that is just how much I have dragged my feet on recording this episode on this particular topic. And the reason that it's ironic, at least to me, is what I hope to cover today are the portion of the step work, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, that people often prolong and drag out and delay putting in the work. If you spend time in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, you'll hear about people getting caught up on their fourth step. And in today's episode, I'm going to be covering steps 4 through 7. And really, from my perspective, all I can do here is deliver to you the content from the literature and overlay my experience on it. I think one of the reasons that I have faltered on starting with this episode is the same reason that people get held up on continuing on through the step work is there is a fear of attempting to do something that is incredibly important, but also that you hope to do well. And I think this potential pursuit of perfection is a big reason that people get held up and tripped up. And in all honesty, I found myself falling to that right now. So with that bit of a preamble, I'm going to get back to the 12 steps and then into the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. There's a fair amount of literature on these 4 steps. So I'll be going into the book and then coming out to overlay my own experience and perception on these critical steps. So to start off, I'm just going to read through the 4 steps. Step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Step 7, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Now, jumping ahead to the book, I just want to note that I've read some of this literature from the book pertaining to the 4th step already. I'm doing my best to extract and pull out portions of the literature that I haven't covered yet before. So now to the book. Next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and a fact-facing process. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. And this in part is coming out of the literature right now. This is in part is a huge reason why people don't get started. In a very weird and twisted way, a lot of people view their experiences and, in all honesty, some of the grudges and resentments that they hold as actually valuable for them. And so just to paint the picture of what that looks like, there are some resentments that I wrote down when I did and took my inventory that in a big way were experiences in my life that I drew back on that gave me great motivation. So maybe as an example, someone who didn't believe in me or thought little of me with regards to what I could accomplish, I held a resentment and used it as motivation. But the short-term value that I got from it was not worth really the continued grudge and resentment that I held on to for so many years, and that ultimately I never allowed to clear through my system and integrate into my life. And it was just something I held on to in a negative way. And so in some respects, I've seen people not want to lose grip of some things that, might actually give them an edge. And then on the flip side of that, there are just some things within alcoholics' lives that they just fear to address, fear to look at. They'd rather suppress it. And I certainly had examples of that when I took my personal inventory. So the spectrum is wide with regards to why people choose to hold on to resentments or not face them or work to either integrate them into their lives in a healthy manner or just to be rid of them entirely. So back to the book. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. We considered its common manifestations. Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. And I'm going to break from the book. The next part of the chapter just goes into how to actually take your inventory. And I've covered this before, but really the manner in which is recommended for everyone and that the book walks through is creating 3 columns. The first column, you answer this question: I am resentful at, and then state the name of the individual or the institution that you hold a resentment against. The next column is the cause, and then the third column is it affects my, and then you detail your self-esteem, your security, and just kind of call out the various aspects of your life that holding that resentment creates for you. Just to give you some detail on it, I sat down and did my inventory over about a 1.5 to 2 hour period one day, and I wound up filling 11 pages in a notebook. And really, it was an incredible experience because I started listing out the ones that were at the front of my mind that were easiest for me to draw upon. But then as I continued writing, it's almost like my pen couldn't keep up with the flood of resentments that were coming forward. And I was pulling and extracting things from way back in, from like 15, 20 years ago that I had thought I had forgotten about. But as I sat down and really thought through this model for building out this list, the things just came pouring out. And in all honesty, almost everyone and anyone in my life that had been there in a meaningful way wound up on my list, which is really hard to face in front of you. And again, I think that's one of the reasons that you see people balk at this step is it's a very tough pill to swallow, to look at the output of this inventory practice and to see in your own handwriting a list of people that you claim to love, cherish, and care about the most, winding up on your inventory list and a list of the key and most powerful resentments that you hold in your life. But that's the point of the exercise, is to clear you of this burden. So back to the book. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. And I'm going to pause and pull out of the book. From my own experience, and this is a pattern and a problem that I still fall into today, but I attempt to be very quick at recognizing and then correcting my ill ways. I was so fast and critical in diagnosing and psychoanalyzing every single other person in my life. Like the book says, others were often wrong, and that's as far as I ever got. I would just lay out the sins of everyone else without reflecting on my own involvement and my own contribution to that situation. Back to the book. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. I'm going to pause again. And what this last statement is getting at, the moments of triumph were short-lived. I would have situations where, again, I would psychoanalyze and then enter into this like manipulative like drive to get back at a person that had wronged me or to feel like I had righted a wrong. And maybe I did feel like I got, say, revenge or got back at someone that I held a resentment against. Those moments were such a flash in the pan with regards to my health, my well-being, that they weren't worth it. This maddening pursuit of getting back at someone that you held a resentment against, well, the upsides were quick and short-lived. The downsides were chronically returning to alcohol, and it just contributed to this cycle that I was going through in my life and drove my life lower and lower and actually caused myself to lose myself in any sense of meaning or purpose. Back to the book. For when harboring such feelings, and they're talking resentment, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns and we drink again. And with us, to drink is to die. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. Referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely looked for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly, and we were willing to set these matters straight. So this paragraph here is about what is often called the fourth column. And so previously I had talked about the 3 columns and prompts for writing out your inventory list. The fourth column is the most imperative, and it is, what are my contributions to this scenario? We are not innocent in any single one of the situations in which we hold grudges or resentments. And I think when it comes down to it, the most powerful thing for me was writing these 11 pages out and then going back through and just genuinely saying, who cares about the individual that I hold a resentment against and their involvement in this. Like I said before, every single person on my list is someone who is important to me in some manner, in some way at a point in my life. And I needed to disregard the grudge that I held against them and just look at it honestly and ask myself, what had I done to contribute to the situation? Back to the book. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. Perhaps there is a better way. For we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role He assigns. We ask Him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what He would have us be. At once, we commence to outgrow fear. And I'm going to back out of the book here. As when I talk to people about really the power of these steps, but really in particular steps 4 and 5, I think that the greatest thing that I got out of these steps and being thorough and honest with these steps is this aspect, removing the fear of judgment. The 4th step allows you as an individual to address these shortcomings, these resentments that you have held on to throughout your life. And as we'll get into next, that 5th step is really just this uncomfortable but entirely necessary step to speak out loud your shortcomings, your transgressions, your resentments. 1, for you to hear it as an individual, but 2, to allow someone else to reflect back upon you, their understanding, and almost to allow you to see that these things that you have harbored and held down and suppressed are not something that you need to be fearful about for being judged. Back to the book. If we have been thorough about our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. We have listed and analyzed our resentments. We have begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. We have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies. We hope you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from Him. If you have already made a decision and an inventory of your grosser handicaps, you have made a good beginning. So I'm actually going to make a game time decision here and actually wrap this podcast up at just covering the 4th step. We will get into the 5th, 6th, and 7th step in the coming episode, but as you can see, there's a lot to digest with this fourth step. As I said at the beginning, it is the one that causes people to get hung up the most. It's the first one where you really start putting pen to paper for the vast majority of the people of people entering into recovery. And it's truly the first time you have to face in the mirror your shortcomings and the things that you have suppressed for years. In my case, there were things hearkening back 15 plus years that had driven me, but had ultimately driven me into isolation, into the depths of my battle with alcoholism. So I would just say in closing here, regarding the 4th step, if you are nervous, if you're fearful, if you are dragging your feet just because of the amount of work and pain that it is going to bring up in your life, view this step as life-saving work, because when it comes down to it, as an alcoholic, your life is indeed on the line. And this is the start. This is the beginning of the truly powerful healing that comes along with these steps. And this is why these steps are so powerful, is this work that has to be put in. So that's far from perfect, but I think I've done as best as I can with this incredibly imperative and important topic. So that's all I've got today. Thank you. Love you all. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with others or give us a rating on your channel of choice. My hope is that my story can help others in their struggles with addiction or any other aspects of life that they feel could be bettered. You can follow us on social media at Chapter 3 Stigma on Instagram and YouTube. I cannot solve your problems for you, but I can listen. If you want to reach out with a message through one of those channels, I will respond and let you know that you are not alone. All the best, you are loved, and life is worth every struggle and bit of suffering you have to endure. Until next time, all the best.